I would just have to have had an experience of God. And it's crazy because, you know, I grew up in the exact circumstances where that should have happened, and it was happening to everyone around me, and yet I got nothing.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Josh, this is Save Skeptic, and today I've got a great video from Frank Turek during one of his Q&As. He's asked in a very important question on the hiddenness of God, also known as the Divine Hiddenness argument. It's a challenge that says if a perfectly loving God existed, he would make himself clearly known to everyone, especially those open to a relationship with him. Now, this argument claims that because there are sincere seekers who remain unsure of God's presence, this hiddenness suggests he might not exist at all. In other words, it argues that a loving God would ensure that no one seeking him would feel left in the dark. Now, this young man asking the question really struck me deeply because I can tell he's truly seeking for God. But could he be going about it in the wrong way? Let's take a look. I've got a lot to say on this, but let's watch the video first because it gets to the heart of something truly deep.
My question is, have you heard of the problem of divine hiddenness?
Yes.
I guess as background, problem of divine hiddenness is essentially a person who is a non-resistant non-believer, somebody who would answer the question that you proposed. If God did exist and you knew it, would you believe in him and serve him? The answer to that would be yes, but they cannot find themselves convinced that he does, no matter how hard they try.
Sure.
I would count myself among that number. I was raised Christian church, Christian school, very Christian community, and yet I find myself a fairly confirmed agnostic, despite quite a bit of research. So how do you reconcile a omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God who desires a relationship with his creation, not being able to, well, okay, maybe that presupposes, but it appears to me that there should be no barrier that I would be able to place in my own heart that an omnipotent God would not be able to surmount. And the fact that he has the desire to surmount any barrier, it seems hard to reconcile. How would you reconcile that?
Okay, yeah, good question. Snellenberg has written much on this, the hiddenness of God. There are many different ways to address this issue, but let me just take one or two ways. It could be that God doesn't want you to become a believer right now. Let me give you an example of someone very prominent. There's a friend of mine who lives in Nebraska he's a Christian apologist, and he had another friend that wasn't a Christian, and he wanted this guy to be a Christian, so he actually gave him my book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And the guy said, I'm not reading that. That was written by a Christian. Well, yeah, of course, a Christian believes it, so he's going to write it. But they lost touch. 10 years later, my friend sees this guy, and he's a Christian. And he goes, what happened? He goes, I've been watching Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson led me to Jesus. Jordan Peterson's not a Christian. And the reason that he's been watching Jordan Peterson is because he considered Jordan Peterson kind of an honest broker. Like he doesn't have a horse in this race. He's just trying to find the truth himself. And Jordan Peterson, being a non-Christian, helped lead this guy to Jesus when a Christian couldn't do it. So it's possible that maybe you're in that same position. Maybe you have people in your life and your circle of influence is going to expand, maybe years from now, to the point that it's big enough where God goes, okay. What's your name again? Luke. Luke, you're ready now. Now, I'm going to reveal more of myself to you, and now you're going to be able to influence these other people in your circle that wouldn't have been there if you had become a Christian 10 years ago. That's a possibility.
Yeah. The problem I found is that, you know, I get much the same answer from a lot of my Christian friends who I've talked to is, you know, God works in his own time. Many years from now, you could be a Christian. The problem I find with that is, like, all it takes is one person who is in my circumstance, who goes to their grave without finding the truth and love of Christ, for that to seemingly fall apart. In
Okay,
my
Luke,
opinion.
I'm not saying this is the case with you, but I'm saying it's the case in general with humanity. We all have a deceitful heart. We might not even know why we do half the things we do. We might say we're completely open, and in the recesses of our hearts, we're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's something between us and the truth, and we don't really want to accept the truth. In fact, let me ask you this. What is your, according to what you believe, is your objection to Christianity evidence-based or something else?
It's an interesting question. I'd say it was probably primarily evidence-based, but in more recent reflection, it's kind of occurred to me that kind of you can't talk somebody into the faith no more than you can like talk somebody out of it. Like that kind of has to be a more deeply felt spiritual realization. And you know, I have all of these kind of arguments rolling around in my head and tons of research I've done, but ultimately it appears to me that I would just have to have had an experience of God. And it's crazy because, you know, I grew up in the exact circumstances where that should have happened, and it was happening to everyone around me, and yet I got nothing. Or maybe I don't know, maybe I did get something and I didn't see it, but if I was meant to see it, I would have, I suppose.
Okay, it's hard not to feel for this kid, you know, him growing up in the church and looking around and seeing all these people that have these experiences, and then he wonders why he's not having that experience. Well, I can feel for him because I've gone through that, you know, and it makes you wonder when you look around if any of this is true, if these experiences, if they're just faking it, or if the Bible is completely fake. And there's a big problem with this idea or this thinking, and it's that we shouldn't really be looking for experiences. In fact, experiences are often emotional experiences, which are fleeting and come and go. And without a true rooted faith, those experiences will not sustain our faith with God. You know, our society is so focused on feelings, which can lead to deception. You know, the Bible says that the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can understand it? But that's not to say experiences aren't valuable. The Bible is filled with them. But the Bible is also filled with accounts of those who've endured times of feeling distant from God. I mean, think about the 400 years of silence between the Old and the New Testament. What's amazing about that time period is that after enduring a time of practically no revelation from God for 400 years, God brought about the most amazing revelation in history with the arrival of Jesus Christ entering into humanity. But this is where the video gets really good, because Frank is about to get into the defense of this argument that I believe gets to the heart of the issue. Let's take a look.
Yeah, perhaps, or maybe it hasn't happened yet. God says, Jesus says, keep knocking, keep seeking. Sometimes the process of becoming a Christian is necessary to make you a deeper person when you become a Christian. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're going through these doubts and these struggles because 5 years from now you're going to become a Christian, and then you're going to have a ministry to people who go through doubts and struggles. So just to say that God, you haven't shown me yet, so you must not exist, is very presumptuous.
Sure.
Okay? God does work on his own time. Mm-hmm. And he's working through people like Jordan Peterson, even though Jordan Peterson, at least to this point, is not a Christian, and maybe God doesn't want him to be a Christian just yet. So I would say just be open, keep seeking. And let me say one other thing about this. Your psychology, my psychology, is not going to tell us what's true outside of our skull. Mm-hmm. Our psychology can deceive us. In fact, our psychology is such that we'll actually ignore evidence for irrational reasons. Let me give you an example. There are probably people in this room that cannot get on an airplane. You're scared to death to get on an airplane. Yet you know from an evidence perspective, the safest way to get anywhere is on an airplane. You should be more afraid to get in your car than to get on an airplane, because statistically, aviation is the safest way to get anywhere. Here we are allowing our psychology to overpower the evidence. Mm-hmm. Could that be the case when it comes to belief in God? Sure it could. This is why James says, he who continues to doubt is tossed to and fro as if you're on a ship in a storm. And C.S. Lewis writes pretty profoundly on this. Have you read Mere Christianity? He writes pretty profoundly on this when he says, you know, there were times when I was an atheist where Christianity just looked all too true. And then there have been times when I've been a Christian when I had such severe doubts. And he said that's where faith comes in, meaning trust, not blind faith. After you've established through reason that Christianity is true, you need to tell your doubts to get off. Because you've already established that it's true by looking at the evidence. And the evidence doesn't change. Your psychology can change with the weather, or the bad pizza you had earlier today, or the fact that your favorite football team, the Dallas Cowboys, lost, right? Thankfully again. Your psychology will not necessarily tell you what's true about what's outside your skull. The evidence will. That's why you got to concentrate on the evidence.
Sure.
All right?
Excellent video. I do hope this young man keeps searching because I believe he is very close, but I want to make a couple of points here. First, I've experienced doubt myself, but often I realized that my doubt was fear-driven rather than based on a lack of evidence. And I think this goes back to the C.S. Lewis quote that Frank mentioned, where Lewis was experiencing doubt as a Christian, but also when he took a stance on atheism. This is our psychology at play, and I think we will often face doubt in the stances we take, especially when they're based on faith. Now, as I mentioned, the doubt I experienced in my youth was fear-driven. Let me give you an analogy, and maybe this will make it all clear. You see, I don't have a problem standing on my 2 feet, but if you place me within arm's length of a cliff, all of a sudden, I lose my confidence in my ability to stand. In fact, I start thinking, well, maybe the wind's going to blow me over if I get too close, even though it's a clear and sunny day. But the fact of the matter is, the wind has never blown me over during a clear, sunny day. So this is my fear driving my thoughts. So when it comes to serious issues, we have to step outside the thoughts led by our emotions and think about the issues logically. I have never been blown over by the wind on a clear, sunny day, so the chances of me being blown over just because I'm standing within arm's length of a cliff it's very unlikely. Likewise, I know God exists because of the impossibility of an ordered world and universe coming from nothing. But my fear of a world with no meaning, of missing out on the goodness of God, leads me to doubt his existence. But asking the question why God wouldn't make himself unmistakably known to everyone overlooks something fundamental about how we relate to God and belief itself. Life isn't a simple carefree journey. I mean, there are real forces at work, including the influence of Satan, who the Bible calls the great deceiver. Let's use another analogy here, okay? The world is more like a rushing river rather than a still lake. Without an intentional effort to seek truth, we're going to get carried away by whatever force is strongest at the moment. Just like Frank said, James warns us that those who lack faith are like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. If we're passive, going wherever the current takes us, we'll be led away from the truth. Finding God requires us to swim against the current, resisting influences that lead us astray so that we can come to know him genuinely. But still, the question remains, why won't God just appear to us? Blaise Pascal offers an interesting perspective, saying that God gives us exactly the right amount of light, too much, and people would believe in God against their will, too little, and those seeking him would struggle in vain. This balance, according to him, respects each person's free will and preserves the humility needed for a genuine relationship with God. If God's presence were overwhelming, faith wouldn't be a choice, but an obligation. Finally, we should also remember that God has revealed himself in various ways already. If we neglect the insights God has already given, we may not be granted more. And unlike the people of ancient times, we now have the full revelation of God revealed through Jesus Christ. The responsibility is on us to take the revelation we have seriously, to look at it closely and evaluate it truthfully, because the Bible says that we will be held responsible for the light we are given. In John 9:41, Jesus says, "If you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin, but now that you claim you see, your guilt remains." Here, Jesus is implying that those who are aware of the truth and choose to ignore it bear responsibility for their disbelief or disobedience. But ultimately, those who are saved are not saved simply because they believe in God. Even the demons believe. So what does that mean? It means faith isn't a checkbox. It's a relationship that requires us to seek God sincerely, a choice to follow him even when our emotions get in the way. While it may feel at times that God is hidden, I'm sure we've all felt that. Perhaps we should look at it as an invitation to seek him further, to deepen our faith, and seek truth actively. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts because this is a really important subject. And in the meantime, take care and God bless.